All right, friends, welcome back to the Tortoise Principle. We are going to be making a pasta bake today that is nice as far as flavor, but also that has really great macros. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I've got some water boiling, and we're going to use that to cook our pasta. So I'm going to go ahead and go through a quick rundown of some of the ingredients that we'll be using. Okay, so first and most basic ingredient that you need for a pasta bake is going to be your pasta. Now, I like to use protein pasta. It's a mixture of grain and legume, usually chickpea pasta. It's pretty good as far as flavor. Nothing like weird or off about it that will put you off from it any different from normal pasta. The only main difference is you do need to cook it just slightly longer because it does tend to require a little bit of extra cooking just to make sure that it gets that right al dente texture. But this is what we're going to be using for our pasta. I've got the water boiling and we will put that in just a moment. This actually is the Kroger brand, and I like to use the cavatappi. It's sort of a weird like spiral macaroni style noodle. I think it tends to hold the sauce better than most other types of pasta. Obviously, if you're using lasagna sheets, that also works great. But if you're going to be using protein pasta, like I'm doing this time, they don't really have a protein pasta lasagna option where I'm at. But if you can find that where you're at, that's a perfect thing to use, and you can get that nice lasagna texture. But yeah, this is what we're going to use for our noodles, and we will get those started shortly. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is building your meat sauce. Okay, next thing we're going to be talking about is building the meat sauce. And a good meat sauce needs a foundation of meat. We're going to use for our meat, we're going to be using 93% lean ground turkey. Now you notice that I got this on clearance because just because you're trying to lose weight doesn't mean you have to break the bank. So this is a good bit cheaper than it normally would be. And it's also still nice and lean. 93% is perfectly fine. Sometimes you can even find leaner than that, but don't feel like it's absolutely necessary to get 98 or 99% lean. 93% lean is just as good. So we're going to use this. Now, you may think, well, ground turkey doesn't have a whole lot of flavor, and on its own it really doesn't. What we're going to do to really make the flavor pop is we're going to make sure we season it properly. And so I have a list of spices that we're going to work with that are going to make this taste like a personal favorite of mine, Italian sausage. So obviously we're going to use salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Those are going to be your basics that are going to be used for just about any type of recipe. I would say they are the staple spices for any diet, regardless of what type of cuisine you're going to be doing. Now, to get that Italian sausage flavor, we have a few more things that we need to add in. And those are going to be ground cardamom and fennel seed. That is what's going to give you that authentic Italian sausage flavor and a little bit of texture. Because you know, when you eat Italian sausage, you have those little crunchy little bits. That's the fennel seed, and that provides a lot of that classic Italian sausage flavor. So those are going to be the seasonings that we use. We'll also add a little bit of Italian seasoning herbs. Those are mainly going to go to zhuzh up the sauce. Don't necessarily need that while we're cooking the meat, but we're going to brown up our meat with all of those seasonings, and that's going to give us that nice Italian sausage flavor with a lot less calories, a lot less fat. So I'm going to go ahead and get that started, and we will come back when we are ready to discuss our last two ingredients. Okay, so our meat is just about browned and ready to go, so we're going to go ahead and talk about our next thing that we're going to build using the meat, and that's going to be our sauce. So here I have just a basic 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. Costs $1. It's not bad. So basically we're going to be combining this with our turkey Italian sausage along with our Italian seasoning, and because I like things with a little bit of kick, I definitely enjoy some heat. I'm also going to add some crushed red pepper flakes because those will really make that heat stand out, and it will give it a nice flavor on top of that. So that's how we're going to build our sauce. We're going to combine that with the meat, and then we will, once our pasta is ready, we'll be ready for assembly. Okay, so our pasta and our sauce are almost done. So I'm going to talk about the last couple of ingredients that we're going to be using for our pasta bake. So the first one that I'm going to mention is fat-free cottage cheese. Now, the reason that I include this ingredient is not just because cottage cheese is less fat than ricotta. I actually prefer cottage cheese, regardless of its fat content, to ricotta because it doesn't have that gritty texture that ricotta sometimes has, where cottage cheese will always be much creamier. So I like the texture that you get from cottage cheese over ricotta, and for the sake of reducing the fat and improving the macros of this dish, choosing fat-free is a good option because it's 4 servings per container, and you get 13 grams of protein per serving at 80 calories per serving. So that's actually pretty elite as far as macros that you're adding to your dish. The last thing that I'm going to include is you can't have a good lasagna or a good pasta bake without some nice melty cheese over the top. So I'm going to be using whole milk mozzarella. You can use part skim, and that'll reduce the calories by a little bit, but I've found that the amount of calories that you reduce versus the texture that you get from the cheese, it's actually better to use the whole milk because it melts better, and it's literally a difference of 30 calories per serving, and you're usually doing like 4 servings over top of the entire thing, so that's 120 calories that you're adding that you wouldn't if you used part skim. If you're good with part skim, that's perfectly valid. I'm just happen to be using the whole milk mozzarella just because it has a little bit better of a melt to it, and generally the fats in mozzarella are kind of the better fats for you anyway. They don't tend to be a lot of the really bad for you fats. So basically, it's okay to use full fat mozzarella, but it's also perfectly fine to use a reduced fat mozzarella. So those are going to be the last things that we're going to do, and we're going to actually, once it's ready, we're going to start layering it kind of the same way you would a lasagna. Even with using the noodles rather than lasagna sheets, you can still layer it in the exact same way, so that's what we're going to be doing in just a moment. Okay, so our pasta is done, our sauce is done, so we are ready for assembly. So what I'm going to start off by doing, and this is the typical thing that you would do for a lasagna, is you want to layer just a little bit of the sauce on the bottom of your dish that you're baking with. That way you're getting that sauce and moisture throughout the dish. So that's just a little bit added to the bottom. Now we're going to take about half of our pasta, and then we are going to layer it in one layer over top of that. You want to make it a nice, even layer. Okay, so once we have that layer, we're going to go ahead and add some more of the sauce over top of that layer. That way we're getting solid coverage of our sauce over each layer of the pasta. So so far we've got 2 layers of pasta and 2 layers of sauce. So the next step we're actually going to be doing gotta set things up so I can work a little bit easier, is we're going to be adding a layer of our cottage cheese. So bear with me just a moment. And we are going to start layering. So literally after the first layer of sauce, it's pasta, sauce, cottage cheese, and then we're going to be doing pasta again. So I'm going to put about half of our cottage cheese in between this layer. And you just try and spread it out as much as you can. You want to try to get it as much coverage as you can get, because you want to make sure that every serving has that nice gooey cheesiness that makes it so good. So we've got about half of the cottage cheese in. It's looking good. So now we're going to add another layer of the pasta. And we're actually going to go ahead and just add the rest of the pasta. That way we can go ahead and add the rest of the sauce as well. Make sure we get nice coverage on that. We're going to add the rest of our cottage cheese. Now the nice thing about the cottage cheese, this is a 16-ounce tub of the cottage cheese. You can do a full 32-ounce tub and that's still perfectly fine. It's one of those things, because of the macros of it, you can kind of almost be guilt-free with it. So feel free to put as much of the cottage cheese on as you want. That way you can get the nice consistency on your pasta bake that is going to make it to where you will be perfectly content to eat it for multiple days in a row. Because ideally, this is a perfect setup for meal prep. So, last thing we're going to do is we're going to sprinkle some of the mozzarella on top, and then we are going to bake. So, I say roughly about a cup of mozzarella should give you full coverage and give it that nice melt. Some people say that there's no such thing as too much cheese, but I kind of disagree. If you put too much cheese, it'll kind of take over the dish. So, and I know I just said that you can put as much of the cottage cheese as you want. Cottage cheese and mozzarella are kind of whole different animals when it comes to that. The meltiness of the mozzarella can kind of take over a dish, whereas the cottage cheese, it's kind of neutral in flavor, but I don't know. Like I said, you can put as much as you want or as little as you want. There's nothing wrong with either one. So we've got our pasta bake layered up. The only thing that remains is to bake it. We're going to bake it in our oven at 400 degrees for about 40 minutes, and then it will be ready to serve. Okay, so our pasta bake is just come out of the oven, and it is looking amazing. Here, let me show you real quick. Doesn't that just look absolutely amazing? So this particular recipe will usually make about 5 or 6 400-gram portions. So 400 grams is a pretty good amount of food. And the macros on that 400-gram portion is actually pretty elite. Very high in protein, very low in fat, and overall just very filling. So I'm actually going to be working, after this cools down a little bit, I'm going to work on portioning it out, and that's going to be my meal prep for the week. If you like this recipe and you think that it's something you want to try, go ahead and give it a like, comment. If you've tried it and you absolutely love it, please let us know, and we will see you in the next video.